Hi guys, welcome to another video. It's Ndagire here. Thanks for coming. Always for the subscribers, thank you so much for your time. I always appreciate it. Today's video, this is something I wanted to share with you guys because I feel like these are things African people have to know or people need to know, and in a times where an African platform or an African channel can be taken down and there's not like a lot of noise, it makes you understand, where the threat is. Like, it's not about talking about racism. The threat is not talking about, oh, they are discriminating us. The threat is always going to go to what Africa is doing to change itself. And I'm starting to realize that, like, the more we talk about racism, it's so much used in the ears of these people. Like, it doesn't even really make sense anymore. Like, they are so used to it. It doesn't move them in any way. I mean, even if they do something, they are so easy to come and just apologize about it. But when it comes to, like, Africa uniting and talking about the things that really matter about developing the African continent, that's where the threat is. That's where the energy is going to go from them people, but not talking about how they discriminate or how they are racist to us. Like, that doesn't move them. It really doesn't. But yeah, guys, watch this clip, come back, and I'll say a few things about it.
Which is the colonial legacies. And of course, a lot of people say, well, come on, colonialism is over. It's been, several decades since independence, but we have the unfinished business of decolonizing economic structures. So I focus on the economic structures that actually produce the results that we're looking at. So when it comes to the colonial role that was imposed on the African continent, it can be summarized in three basic points. Number one, we're supposed to be the place for cheap raw materials for the industrialized world. We still play that role today. Number two, we were supposed to be the place that consumes technology and industrial output from the global north. We still play that role today. And number three, and most importantly, we're supposed to be the place where obsolete technologies, assembly line manufacturing that is no longer needed in the industrialized world is outsourced to us under the label of development, cooperation, job creation, technical assistance, all of that. But effectively, what it does is that it permanently locks us at the bottom of the global value chain. That was the role we played during colonial times, and unfortunately, that is the role we continue to play today. So colonialism, of course, was not a system for development. It was not designed to achieve sustainable development goals or a just transition or justice or anything. Colonialism was a system of extraction, of abuse. We should not be surprised that the same colonial structures, economic colonial structures that persist today, are producing these bad results of malnutrition, of poverty, of socioeconomic exclusion. So that's why, in the context of the just transition and the context of decarbonization, we always say we cannot decarbonize a system that hasn't been structurally and economically decolonized yet. And when it comes to kind of the visible manifestation of these problems, the issue of external debt, that is debt denominated in foreign currencies, in dollars and euros. It is a serious problem because it takes a huge amount of fiscal policy space that doesn't allow our governments to invest in the building blocks of development and prosperity, such as basic health and education and infrastructure, because we have to prioritize paying the external debt. But external debt is actually a symptom of deeper structural issues that have colonial roots. Number one, food deficits. Number two, energy deficits. And number three, manufacturing deficits. And I can explain each very briefly so we can understand why these are fundamental. When I say food deficits, according to UNCTAD, the UN Conference on Trade and Development, Africa today imports 85% of its food. 85%. When less than 100 years ago, during colonial times, we used to be the breadbasket for colonial powers. And what happened is that there's a redesign of the system as soon as we gained independence. In 1955, for example, in Europe, at the Treaty of Rome meeting, the Europeans said we have a food security problem for Europe because they were so dependent on Africa. And that introduced a common agricultural policy, which is in place to this day. So what is CAP? It's heavy agricultural subsidies to produce the core crops in Europe, such as corn and wheat and soybean and the core food security items. And of course, it wasn't just Europe that did that. It was the United States, Canada, Australia, the former Soviet Union, which is why Russia and Ukraine today dominate the grain industry. And what it did is that it forced African farmers out of business because they couldn't compete with the subsidized wheat and corn coming from the global north. So we had to redesign our agriculture to specialize in cash crops for exports. coffee, tea, tobacco, bananas, all the complementary items. So today we live in a world where we consume what we don't produce, and we produce what we don't consume. And that's why we have real food insecurity on the African continent and the rest of the global south, obviously. So that's the food deficiency. Number two, energy deficiency. When I say energy deficits in Africa, I include our biggest oil exporter on the continent. Nigeria today imports 100% of its gasoline, not by accident, by design. Angola, our second largest oil exporter, imports 80% of its fuel from international markets. So we're constantly denied the technology for processing, the technology for drilling, the technology for refining. So we export crude oil, we import refined petrochemicals. You export the cheap stuff, you import the more expensive stuff. So you're always in a deficit situation. And finally, the manufacturing deficits, the fact that the only type of manufacturing base that we were allowed to have is the kind where we have to import the machines, we have to import the fuel to power the factories, we have to import the intermediate components to be assembled with low-cost labor, and we even import the packaging. So we end up with the value-added content of what we export is low value added, what we import is high value added. So you can double, triple, quadruple your exports. You're always locked at the bottom of the value chain. And here's how it's manifested. You have these structural deficits, the most fundamental areas. As you know, no country can function without food, without fuel, without manufacturing. So we have structural trade deficits. And what structural trade deficits do is that they weaken our currencies relative to the dollar, relative to the euro. And with the weaker currency, anything I need to import the next morning, whether it's food or fuel or medicine, you import it at a higher price. So we literally import inflation in the most sensitive areas of the economy, therefore hurting the most vulnerable people in society. And that immediately forces our governments into a defensive position to protect the most vulnerable. So what do? We subsidize food, we subsidize fuel, which makes sense to protect the most vulnerable, but you can't do that for 8 decades. And we ask our central banks to stabilize the exchange rate, to fight inflation. And the way they do it is by using a band-aid solution, which is borrowing more dollars. And that gets the external debt into a vicious cycle that is unsustainable, which means now the government is completely obsessed with prioritizing economic activity that will allow us to earn dollars as quickly as possible so that we service the debt. And we deprioritize economic activity that is actually transformational, that is actually the foundation of development and prosperity. And that is the essence of why we neglect so many of the priorities. And that's why a lot of the fiscal policy space that our governments have is dedicated to servicing the debt, which is by design the colonial architecture that was imposed on us. So that's why we say we can't really achieve the sustainable development goals or a just transition or any of the goals that we want to achieve under a system, an economic system that's still structurally colonized when we have economies that are technically steered from abroad.
As we've seen the video, that is what he had to say. And he was talking about how, you know, we were put in positions where we are still to be under the Western countries, be it socially, be it politically, be it religious or spiritual wise, be it in every sector. Africa was programmed and put in a position where we always have to depend on the Western countries. When it comes to, like, this thing really baffles me, like farming or agriculture. I'm like, when did we get to this position where we have like the most beautiful, fertile soil that the creator or whoever that you believe in gave to us, but we have to depend on the coordinations to give us seeds or even bring in their crops for us to grow, to have food. Like, it really baffles me seeing that, let's say the US has to donate food to African countries, and I'm like, is that a joke? But then it's reality, because it is really something that is happening. And then also when it comes to the resources, like having the gold, the resources that we have in the continent, and we still have to depend on the products that are from the coordinations from the Western countries. It baffles me. I'm like, how did we reach this position? And I mean, how are we even still allowing this to happen? We literally have everything, but we can't control any of it because of what happened in the past. And we need to start getting to understand those things, or at least try to learn about those things. Like the sector of agriculture, basically for me, as a Ugandan, where our country has the best soil to grow literally anything. You can just eat anything and throw it in the soil or wherever, and it grows. Literally, that's how fertile Ugandan land is. But then you read articles where they are saying the cold nations like the United States of America or the European countries or even Asian countries giving aid in terms of food to African countries. And I'm like, which book are we reading? Talking about racism or talking about how these people can be known so much in our faces or like us so much is not a threat anymore, because African Stream to be taken down is not because they were talking about racism or how discrimination, They were talking about empowerment within African people, connecting African people, businesses within African people, and that is a threat to the Western countries because they do not want to see anything of Africa uniting. And this is what I tell you guys all the time. Like, I love my brothers and sisters in the diaspora. They are really the pioneers, I would say, right now in calling out them people. But at the end of the day, they are not a threat to the Western countries. Like, yes, you have the voices, you have the spending power within the Black community. You hold financially when it comes to how Black people are seen in the world, but you're not really a threat to these people because they can't really get anything from you except manage you or really give you opportunities. But when it comes to Africa uniting and really getting, you know, this freedom that we are thriving for or really talking about, wishing to have, that is the major threat. And this is why I say everything our brothers and sisters might say or do in the West, it doesn't move the Western structure in any way. Like, it doesn't move them at all. You don't have any threat that can shake them to the point of, oh, we need to change or we need to do better. And I'm sorry to say it that way. Some of you are going to get offended, but it is the truth. But like I said, when it comes to Africa uniting, removing borders or really controlling our things, it means we are getting into our power of controlling the resources that are brought to where you guys live in the cold nations for them to sustain themselves. It's not something that I even want to put a lot on the Western people, because when I read into some of Ugandan history and you get to find out that our people accepted mirrors over their people, you ask yourself, like, how can you tell me that we are also not a problem as a people? Why would you trade a human being over a freaking cup, over a freaking mirror? Are you insane? Are you okay? The same way our leaders go and sign off our resources to better the lives of these other groups of people than their own people. Make it make sense. Why aren't other African countries really putting a stand and sitting in conversations, or really, like, let's say African Union sitting together and being like, you know, Congo has really had enough. Libya has had enough. Somalia has had enough. They don't care. They don't really care. And these are our own people. So we can't really put the blame on these other groups of people. Yes, they are the source of the problem, but at this end and this time of 2024, in this era that we are in, it's mostly us and the leaders that we have in the continent or in the Black community that are not willing to really step up and see the problems that we are facing and come together and fight those problems. Yes, you're going to tell me the right ones are always attacked. Why can't we always see the problem or see them being attacked and stand up? Yes, these people or this Arab man or other white people or other groups of people can come out and really talk about the things that really happened, like how we have to take a lot of loans in Africa, how we have to give out our resources, how we have to be the laborers of other people, how we have to even take in food from the cold nations, how even in religion we have to be having the faces of other people in our community. They can come and talk about those things. We need to have something to offer to be taken seriously. I'll keep saying that. I'll keep emphasizing that. But until then, let me know what you think about what is going on. What you think about this Arab man and what he had to say, as well as what do you think about African Stream being taken down in the silence that is in the people that claim to be for the Black community. Like, yeah. Thanks for watching, guys. That is it for me in the video. Let me know what you think about everything. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I appreciate the super chats and the members. It means a lot. Yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.